Have you ever decided to start a research project but did not know where to begin? Or maybe you wanted to build a product but were not sure which one was worth your time. The answer often lies in a concept called gap analysis. If you do not know what the gap is, what is missing in the research or what is missing in the product landscape, you risk spending your time on something that has already been done. That means you could end up working on something with little value. On the product side, if you build something that already exists in the market and is already well established, the chances of your product or company succeeding will be very low. That is why gap analysis is a crucial concept, whether you are doing research or developing a product. It's about finding what is missing, what is impactful and missing, and what is feasible from a technology perspective. And that is the essence of gap analysis. Hello everyone, this is Pedram and you are watching Artificial Intelligence Unorthodox Lessons. Today we will build an effective prompt to do gap analysis using a series of best practices in prompt engineering. I hope you will enjoy it. Before we jump into the live demo, I would like to go through several principles of prompt engineering that I use to craft this effective prompt for gap analysis. I'm trying to show it to you in a step-by-step fashion to help you understand principles and understand how to apply them for gap analysis use case and for any other use case that you have in your mind. I will start with a very basic structured role, task, context. This is a very basic structure that kind of sets the baseline for your prompting experience. It is very minimal, it's kind of open-ended, and definitely lacks direction. It is a great starting point to demonstrate the impact of improvement when you applying other principles and other best practices into your prompting. Let me read the prompt. In the role section, I define that you are an expert research assistant specialized in analyzing pros and cons. We call this as a role-based prompting, which means that I ask AI to behave as a research assistant, as an expert research assistant, specialized in analyzing limitations and capabilities. I'm kind of guiding AI to perform better in this role. We call this as a role-based prompting. In the task section, I ask AI to identify and rank the top 3 to 5 significant research gaps in a specified research domain that's being defined in the context section. I separate task and context just for sake of readability. And it's not important to have to define your research area or your question in the task, but since I wanted to use this prompt as a template that being used for different purposes, I separate task and content and context. So let's go to the step 2. In step 2, I ask AI to get back to me with some measurable metrics. I highly recommend you to use this idea in every projects that you want to basically run by AI. When you ask AI to get back to you with some self-evaluation metrics, such as, for example, in this case, novelty of the research gap or feasibility of the research gaps or the impact of the research gaps. It helps AI to think twice. It helps AI to get back to you with something that can compare, that can be ranked. So I highly recommend this approach for any projects and any application that you want to use. I use the same idea of this, measurable metrics in a risk analysis use case that I explained in the other video. Basically, when you ask the model to provide self-evaluation metrics, you turn AI into an analyzer rather than just a responder. So instead of merely responding to you, it helps you to analyze a situation. Having these metrics definitely adds transparency to your problem and also help you to rank or sort the answers based on different metrics that you need. One important point here is if you are not very expert in the field that you are writing prompt, you may not want to add this sort of instruction, because when you add instruction to AI, you guide AI, you constrain AI to follow your instruction. And if you are not expert in the field, you better to be away from all of these instructions. But here, since I know prompting, since I know research, since I know gap analysis, I guide AI to follow my instruction and get back to me with what I need, not what he wants. But keep that in your mind. If you're not expert in a field, you better to not constrain AI so much, because you otherwise mislead AI. In the next step, we apply a principle which I call expert simulation, which means we must replicate the skills and knowledge of an expert in the prompt. In this video, we are mimicking a highly skilled research assistant. We aim to follow the exact steps that an expert, or better to call expert researcher, takes to perform a thorough gap analysis. The first key practice is using recent high-impact publication, typically from the last 5 years. That's why we add these specific terms in the task to mimic the behavior of an expert researcher. Experts usually avoided outdated sources like papers from 20 or 30 years ago. That's why we emphasize on the publication from the past 5 years. They definitely might review 1 or 2 foundational or theoretical papers from the 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but most of their focus is on recent publications. Being focused on recent high-impact publication is very required for conducting an effective gap analysis. Let's go to the next principle. Before I jump into the next principle, there is another aspect of expert simulation principle that I want to explain. Being focused on only the recent publications is an obvious improvement, but let's emulate the definition of a gap from a scientific perspective. If you don't clearly define what you mean by a gap, the AI may interpret it in a way that does not match your goal, your intent. In research and problem solving, a gap generally refers to an unmet need or unanswered question or unexplored area that prevents progress from the current state toward the desired outcome. Identifying these gaps, often involving pinpointing open questions, and for each question, we must explore potential solutions given the current limitations. In my definition, as above, gap analysis rests on 5 pillars: current state, limitations of existing work, desired outcome, open questions, and potential solutions. Using these pillars, I instruct AI to deliver detailed, relevant, and well-structured responses. This prompting principle ensures the AI outputs align with my objective. So I highly recommend you to use this principle in any experience of yours, and make sure to define your intent in a very detailed way to make sure the AI response is aligned with what you need. Let's go to the next principle. The next principle or next step here is all about creating clarity and building trust. We define the output format and apply some constraint for sake of clarity. We use a predefined format like a concise table to present our results, which is in this case is the report of gap analysis. That's why we add this term in the output section, a table with each gap and all the relevant scores. This is more effective. This structured response, this tabular representation is much more effective than lengthy paragraph-heavy documents. That's why this principle has been introduced. As you see, we also limit AI response to 150 to 250 words per each gap and per each section, basically, to create a more smooth reading experience for myself and for anyone who uses this prompt. When you constrain the AI response to a short number of words, usually helps AI generate more trustworthy responses and avoid unnecessary explanation. So the constraint push AI to generate and present more trustworthy response and remove all the unnecessary words and unnecessary explanation. So this structure of having a tabular presentation and constraint ensure AI delivers clear, concise, and trustworthy response to me. I highly recommend you use this principle in all of your attempts as well. It's gonna help you to have much more readable and useful response. Let's go to the next principle. The next principle is called task clarification. When you define some detail in your task, in your output structure, you better to clarify it as much as possible. Again, because otherwise AI may assume something which is not aligned with your line of thought and with your need. So step 5 here is just task clarification, which is especially important for expert users. If you're not expert user, if you are not an expert user, you may not get involved with many of these clarification or detail, because you may mislead AI. So keep that in your mind. If you are an expert user, do your best, clarify your need, have some details in your prompt to make sure the output of AI align with your objective. But if you are not an expert user, try to avoid many explanation, many details, because there is a good chance that you mislead AI. In general, clear definitions ensure AI understands task precisely. Again, given the assumption that you are an expert user. For example, in this prompt, we ask AI to identify the limitations of existing work, and we define what we meant by limitation, which is in this case is a methodological flaws, scope restrictions, and inconsistency in current studies. Let's go to the next and last principle before we jump into the live demo. So the last principle that, or last step better to call, is what I call it guidelines. You just need to set guidelines if anything comes to your mind that does not fit in any other previous sections, like task or role or output format. Or if you want to emphasize on something that it is very important for you. In any of these situations, you can add a new section, let's call it guidelines, to emphasize on something or to mention another request of yours which is not fitted in all other parts. So for example, here we highlight the need to focus on actively debated and current gaps and being away from outdated or resolved issues. This is kind of obvious, but in order to push AI to go toward the right direction, sometimes it's recommended to have these sort of emphasis and have these sort of guidelines at the end of your prompt. So given all of these steps that I went through, now I have a prompt, a gap analysis prompt that I'm gonna use for a real demo. I'm very excited to show it to you. I hope you guys are also excited to see how improvement we can get with these advanced prompts when you want to run a gap analysis project. Let's jump into the real demo. So after explaining all the details of how to craft an effective prompt, I want to show how the results would look like in the live demo. I choose Grok because it's one of my favorite AI. So let's copy and paste the prompts that I created before. In a step 1, I only define role and task and context, which is a climate change. I let the Grok decide about how they want to respond to me. It get back to me with the top 5 significant research gap. It provides some description, why it is significant, the challenges behind. It is a very good start, but I have to mention that the behavior of Grok can change in different runs. So if I run this prompt one more time, I may get different answer. If I run this prompt on another AI, I may get different answer. But it's a definitely good response to start with. As you can see, there's not quantification metric. Quantification metrics is something that I would kind of expect. So I will add those metrics to my prompt and rerun my prompt in the Grok. So now Grok respond to me with all these metrics that I expected. As you see, Grok added these metrics like impact, novelty, and feasibility, but it kind of reduces the answer that provided before. This is exactly where I mentioned if you do not know the details of your response, if you are not expert in the field that you are exploring, let AI choose by itself. Let AI behave by itself. Right now, in the step number 2, AI, the Grok, get back to me with these metrics, but it reduces its answer, which is not preferable. I wanted more explanation, more description. But since I'm gonna add more details, it's not an issue for me at this moment. But right now, I have those scores that I expect. Let's go to the step number 3, where I try to mimic the expert with providing more details, like the definition of the gap. As you see here, Grok only get back to me with a description of the gap, no limitation, no open question, no the current state and everything. But when I specify those items, now I will expect Grok to get back to me with all those details. So now Grok get back to me with a significant research gap defined, with more explanation of the current state, limitation, desired outcome, open questions. These are the structure that I define in the prompt. Now I have a much better response from AI, a response that I expect, a series of questions that I needed to be answered. Let's go to the step number 4, which is more about type of the kind of presentation of the results in a table and add more clarity to the outcome. So in the step number 4, I ask AI to provide tabular presentation and more basically explanation for each item. So see, now I have a table, I can compare them, I can understand them better, so I gain more trust into the response. Step number 5. Before I go to the step number 5, I want to read limitation of one of these gaps. Here it said that models struggle with nonlinear dynamics, limited observational data, and computational constraint. Interactions between tipping elements are poorly understood, as noted by this citation. The limitation that AI provided to me is definitely something that I found in the documents, in the basically the data that has access to. But when I'm talking about limitation of existing work in this context, I have my own definition of limitation. For example, is it a methodological flaw? Is it a scope restriction? Is it inconsistency in results? These are something that I expect to see beyond the details of limitation. That's why in step number 5, I added those explanation. So let's enter the prompt of step number 5 with the explanation for current state, limitation, and desired outcome, and so on, and see what results I can get. So let's look into the limitation. So as you see, the limitation parts gain more description, have more description now. And not only it has more explanation, but also tells me if the limitation is in methodology or if it's in knowledge or anything else. So it does not jump into the details of limitation. It first tells me what type of limitation it has in a high level, as if it's, for example, methodological flaw or inconsistency in the studies and so on, and then provide the details, which is definitely what I expect from the prompt. And last but not least, step number 6 has some extra notes in the guidelines. Which, based on the guidelines that I provide, I expect references with a specific format and being focused on more recent studies rather than the very old literatures. When you provide guidelines, sometimes, you add guidelines for the sake of emphasizing on something that you already mentioned in the above, but you just want to make sure that things are being followed. That's why you add it in a guideline. So sometimes when you add something in a guideline, there's no, new results. You just add it to the guidelines for sake of making sure your response, your results are followed, everything that you said in the prompt. The last thing which I want to show to you today is the difference between the very basic prompt, the response of the very basic prompt, and the response to the final prompt with all the details that we added. On the left side of the screen, you see the output of the basic prompt, and on the right side you will see the output of the prompt with all the details that we had. As you see, the basic prompt is decent. There's no doubt about that. But the point is, it may not be readable for me, or it may not be useful for me in a way that I want. So there are a list of 5, research gap, there are explanation, the pros and cons, there are some, ranking methodology for that. But on the right side, as you see, it's structured in a way that I prefer. List of gaps with all those scores and all those metrics that I want. Plus, for each gap, I have the explanation in a structured format with the current status, desired outcome, limitation, and so on. So the whole idea of crafting effective prompt is about to create something that is useful for you, that is readable and trustworthy for you. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, stay curious and don't forget to subscribe.